Overnight, Trump administration officials admitted to a, quote, administrative error that they made when they deported a Maryland father with protected legal status to a prison in El Salvador. They said that the court is unable to bring him back now, even though the U.S. government is paying for him to be detained there in El Salvador. The accidental deportation came despite the fact that, quote, ICE was aware of his protection from removal status. The man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, fled El Salvador due to gang violence. And The Atlantic reports that in 2019, quote, a U.S. immigration judge found he would likely be targeted by gangs if he were deported back. They add that Abrego Garcia, who is married to a U.S. citizen and has a 5-year-old disabled child who is also a U.S. citizen, has no criminal record in the United States, according to his attorney. Joining our coverage, staff writer at The Atlantic, bylined on that reporting we read from, Nick Murnoff is here. Nick, this is so harrowing on every level. What is the White House explanation is simply Orwellian. Yes, it was a clerical error, and yes, he's there forever. Is that their current position?
Well, not quite. I mean, they're saying it was a clerical error, but he's also a active, high-ranking gang member. What's notable is that the government has not tried to prove that in court. They're saying that even though he was mistakenly deported from the country, that he deserved it essentially because he's an active gang member. His attorneys are pointing out that the government didn't try to reopen his case and strip his protected status. Again, this is a guy who received protected status in the United States in 2019, has been living his life since then, does not have a criminal record, has not committed crimes since then. And was picked up by ICE on March 12th and quickly, deported to this prison in El Salvador.
What happens next?
Well, his attorney's first request of the government is to get the Trump administration to ask El Salvador to return him. The government is saying that it won't do that it doesn't have the jurisdiction to do that he's essentially out of their hands. And that even though it was a mistake, that they're recognizing that, he basically deserved it, and the president's prerogative to deport him.
Nick, the error is obviously exacerbated by the fact that there was no due process given to him before this deportation. And it seems like that process is what protected him from an accusation for which there was no proof. Do you know if there is anyone else in his position?
I'm not aware of anyone else in his specific position, and attorneys that I spoke to were shocked that someone who had already received this protected status, known as withholding of removal, would be arrested and rapidly deported from the country like this. This is a guy who, in a lot of the accusations about him revolve around a 2019 incident when he was picked up and essentially transferred to ICE custody. The government says a confidential informant told them that he was a gang member, but then the government was never able to establish he was a gang member. There wasn't any proof of it. He fought those claims, and he eventually won in court, and he received this protected status at the end of 2019. So this is a guy who basically got due process in 2019 and then just randomly was rearrested last month without some sort of new crime or new accusation or any new evidence that he would be able to challenge in court.
And Christy, this is sort of the problem, I suppose, with doing things the way they're going about doing these deportations.
Right. So my understanding from reviewing the documents is he was somebody who can be removed. There was an order that he can be removed, but he is protected from being removed to El Salvador. And what did they do? They removed him to El Salvador. And there's an order in place for a reason. I mean, the judge in that order saying he can't be removed to El Salvador found he's credible, that he's not actually a member of a gang, that he was being threatened with death, that his family was being threatened. I mean, it was a harrowing decision to read, and to know that they just disregarded it, and then it's, oops, well, you're there, too bad, so sad, we're not going to go make any attempt to try and get you back. That can't be how we deal with these things. I think many people in the United States would think that if somebody is a gang member and they're not here legally, they should be deported. I don't think that's controversial, but there has to be a process to make sure we're not getting it wrong, that we're not making mistakes. And time after time, we're seeing all of these people come forward and say, we're not gang members. And why not just let them have that process that they're entitled to have in the courts so that the judge can make a determination? They are trying to do this kind of shock and awe. I haven't heard anything about whether or not they have quotas, but that would be a question I'd have as to why they're doing this. Are these ICE agents, do they have a certain number they have to hit? Why are we making so many mistakes, it seems? And why don't you want to afford people the process? If you afford them the process and you feel confident with the proof that you have that they are in fact gang members, this should be pretty simple. So I think this is just another unfortunate example of the government really not dotting its I's and crossing its T's.